There comes a time when love isn't enough to protect you. When the intensity of your feelings blinds you to the sacred duty you owe yourself, your power, your dignity, your emotional fortress. Too many people confuse love with surrender. They confuse closeness with complete exposure. And here's the truth: you can love deeply, you can care fiercely, but you must never hand over all of yourself. Because when you do, you don't just risk heartbreak, you risk losing your own identity. Not everything about you is for public consumption. Not every thought, not every weakness, not every private war you're fighting belongs in someone else's hands. There are things that must remain yours and yours alone. When you give away these pieces, you don't get them back. And it's not about trust. It's about preservation. It's about being the guardian of your own soul. Never tell the world about the cracks you haven't yet learned how to mend. Never tell about the fears that paralyze you when you're alone in the dark. Never tell about the battles you're still too fragile to face. Because some things, once spoken, can be weaponized. Some things, once shared, can become the very chains that bind you. People often mistake love as a license to expose every wound. They think if they hold nothing back, they'll receive the same in return. But strength doesn't come from emptying yourself to be filled by someone else. Strength comes from standing whole, from knowing there are places within you no one is allowed to enter. Places that remain yours, untouched, unshaken. Never tell the world your deepest insecurities. They may comfort you in the moment, but one day they can be turned against you. Hold them close. Face them in silence. Overcome them in secret. Never tell the world about the mistakes you regret so deeply they haunt your every step. Some chapters deserve to be closed without witnesses. Some scars are yours to carry, not theirs to judge. Never tell the world your self-doubt when you're still building your confidence. Speak strength into existence even when your hands tremble. You can be vulnerable, but not in ways that dismantle your power. Never tell the world about the people you can't get over. Because you teach others where your heart is still bleeding. You teach them where to cut you the deepest. And never tell the world the limits you believe you have. Because when you say you can't, you give them permission to believe you can't. Keep your ceilings invisible. Let them guess where your limits are. Let them wonder if you even have any. The power you hold is in the parts you protect. The world doesn't get to know all of you. They can love you, admire you, walk with you, but they don't get to own your story. Not the whole of it. Protect your narrative. Guard your silence. Choose wisely what you release and what you keep locked within. Because when you master that choice, you master your life. Now is the time to reclaim your boundaries. Now is the time to become unshakable. Stop giving away the keys to your kingdom. Start moving with the kind of strength that forces the world to respect the doors you choose to keep closed. Stand up, rise, and protect your power. Because the moment you stop oversharing is the moment you start truly leading your life. There are certain battles in life that must remain yours, and yours alone. These battles are not meant to be broadcasted, dissected, or laid bare for someone else to hold. When you expose every crack, every struggle, you give away pieces of yourself that should stay sacred. You risk arming others with knowledge that could be turned against you in moments of weakness or conflict. Not every internal war requires an audience. Not every fight needs to be validated by external understanding. There is a quiet strength in carrying your burdens privately, in working through them silently while the world believes you are unshaken. People often confuse emotional intimacy with complete disclosure. They think love or connection gives others the right to access the deepest, rawest parts of their souls. But the truth is, some struggles lose their power when faced alone. When you share every internal storm, you can unintentionally create openings where you are most vulnerable. There is a difference between being emotionally available and being emotionally naked. You owe it to yourself to keep some layers unpeeled, to protect the places within you that are still healing or still uncertain. When you reveal the battles you are still fighting, you run the risk of being misunderstood or misjudged. Some people may claim they can handle your truth, but the reality is, not everyone is equipped to carry your darkness. Some may use it against you when the tides shift, and others may withdraw, unsure of how to navigate the weight of your struggles. Silence in these moments is not weakness. It is wisdom. It is the discipline of protecting the sacred parts of yourself that are not yet ready to face external opinions, questions, or scrutiny. There is also a quiet power in proving to yourself that you can handle your own storms. When you keep certain battles private, you develop an inner resilience, a self-trust that can only come from walking through fire alone. You learn how to self-soothe, how to navigate uncertainty without leaning on validation or constant reassurance. This strengthens not just your mind, but your spirit. You build a fortress within that no one can tear down because no one knows exactly where the walls begin or where the hidden doors are placed. Too often, people share their struggles with the expectation of immediate comfort. But sometimes that comfort does not arrive, and the act of sharing only amplifies the pain. When you place your private battles into someone else's hands, you surrender control over how that information is handled, interpreted, or remembered. Your story is no longer just yours. It becomes something someone else can shape, twist, or use. By protecting those battles, you keep the narrative in your hands. You decide the meaning, the outcome, and the legacy of your own fight. There are moments when silence becomes your strongest defense and your sharpest weapon. By not revealing every challenge you face, you cultivate an air of mystery and emotional independence that commands respect. You train yourself to become the kind of person who can stand tall even when the winds are fierce, because you know you've weathered storms in the privacy of your own soul. The person who doesn't need to announce their suffering is often the one who possesses unshakable strength. Protecting your private battles also preserves your energy. When you keep certain struggles to yourself, you don't have to manage anyone else's reactions, opinions, or unsolicited advice. You can focus fully on the fight itself, without the noise, without the confusion of external perspectives clouding your path. The clarity you gain from moving quietly allows you to solve problems faster, to heal on your own terms, and to walk away with a deeper sense of self-awareness and confidence. There is immense dignity in knowing that you have overcome things no one else will ever know about. That quiet victory is one of the most powerful gifts you can give yourself. You don't need to parade your scars to prove your strength. The battles you fight in silence often become the foundation for the life you build in power. When you protect your private battles, you ensure that your life is led by your choices, not by the exposure of your pain. Guarding your self-worth begins with understanding that your value is not up for negotiation. It is not something you hand over for approval, nor is it something you should shrink to make others feel comfortable. Too often, people compromise their worth in the name of love, validation, or acceptance, believing that if they expose their deepest doubts about themselves, they will be met with compassion. But not everyone will honor that vulnerability. Some will see it as an opportunity to control, to manipulate, or to diminish you. That is why your self-worth must be protected as your most priceless possession, because when you allow others to define it, you slowly lose ownership of it. There are moments when the temptation to reveal your self-doubt is overwhelming, especially in the presence of those you trust. You may feel that sharing your uncertainties will draw you closer to someone, that honesty about your perceived flaws will foster intimacy. But there is a line between openness and self-sabotage. When you give voice to your deepest insecurities, you breathe life into them. You risk making them real, not just to yourself, but to those around you. You teach people how to perceive you. If you speak of yourself as inadequate, they may begin to believe it too. If you speak of yourself as limited, they may start to treat you accordingly. Guarding your self-worth is not about pretending to be perfect. It is about choosing which narratives you allow to escape your lips. It is about speaking strength over yourself even when you are in doubt, because the words you say about yourself become the blueprint of how others treat you. When you declare that you are enough, even when you are trembling inside, you set a standard. You establish that your worth is not dependent on temporary emotions, nor is it subject to the approval of others. Your self-worth must be fortified like a fortress, not left open like a door anyone can walk through. When you reveal too much about where you feel you fall short, you run the risk of attracting people who will feed on those insecurities. There are those who look for cracks to widen, who seek out vulnerabilities to exploit, not to heal. By sharing your self-doubt, you may unwittingly give others a manual on how to weaken you. Some will cloak it in care, others in subtle jokes, but the end result is the same. They will start to test the boundaries you have not firmly protected. Guarding your self-worth means not allowing anyone to step into that territory without your explicit permission. People often think that authenticity means laying everything bare, but true authenticity is selective. It is rooted in discernment. You can be real without being entirely exposed. You can be honest without sacrificing your dignity. You can acknowledge your humanity without advertising every shadow you carry. Guarding your self-worth is about knowing which parts of your story deserve to be protected, and which parts can safely be shared. It is about setting the tone for how others view you, and ensuring you never surrender that control. The conversations you have about yourself, both internally and externally, shape your reality. If you constantly talk about what you lack, what you fear, and what you believe you cannot do, You build a cage around your own potential. When you guard your self-worth, you actively choose to build yourself up with every word you speak. You choose to affirm your capability, your intelligence, your resilience, even when the road is hard. This doesn't mean you ignore your struggles. It means you refuse to let them define you or dictate your identity. There is power in silence when it comes to your perceived flaws. Not every doubt requires an audience. Not every insecurity needs to be given a voice. When you keep certain things to yourself, you maintain leverage. You retain the upper hand in how you are seen, how you are treated, and how you move through the world. Your silence can become a shield, a boundary that prevents others from gaining access to the parts of you that are still growing, still evolving. By protecting those areas, you give yourself space to build quiet confidence that does not depend on external validation. Guarding your self-worth is a lifelong practice. It demands that you be intentional with your words, careful with your disclosures, and vigilant with your energy. It requires that you become the first and fiercest protector of your own narrative. When you walk into a room, your worth should already be known. Not because you've begged for recognition, but because you've carried yourself as someone who will never allow it to be questioned. You cannot teach others to value you if you have not first committed to valuing yourself. There is a quiet danger in revealing the people and experiences you have not fully let go of. When you speak openly about the past attachments that still grip your heart, you unknowingly expose the blueprint of your emotional landscape. You reveal where the old wounds remain tender, where the memories still pulse with life, and where your heart is most vulnerable to being touched or manipulated. Past attachments are powerful, because they often remain unfinished stories within you. And when you offer them freely to someone else, you give them a map to the places you are still emotionally tethered. It's tempting to believe that sharing your lingering feelings about someone from your past will bring you closer to those around you. You might think that honesty will be met with compassion, that vulnerability will create deeper understanding. But there are moments when such transparency can work against you. When people know who still holds emotional weight in your life, they may test you, compare themselves to your past, or even feel empowered to poke at those emotional scars when conflict arises. Not everyone deserves to know where your heart has been, or where it occasionally wanders. Speaking openly about who you can't forget places you at a disadvantage, especially if you are still working through those emotions. Some people may quietly hold this knowledge until the right moment arrives to challenge your loyalty or question your readiness. Even if they never speak it aloud, the awareness of your unresolved attachments may plant seeds of doubt in their minds, shaping the way they see you and altering the dynamics of trust. Protecting your emotional past is not deception. It is preserving your own stability and safeguarding the sacred spaces within you. Keeping your past attachments private allows you the space to process those feelings on your own terms. It spares you from external commentary, from misguided advice, and from unsolicited opinions that may not align with your emotional truth. It gives you the power to heal quietly, without the pressure of proving to others that you've moved on or convincing them that those old chapters no longer affect you. Your healing is your responsibility, and it should not be dependent on anyone else's timeline or understanding. There are people who will instinctively search for your weaknesses, who will press for details about your past loves, past obsessions, past failures, all under the guise of curiosity or connection. Sharing these details might feel harmless at first, but it creates emotional leverage that someone else can hold over you. They may never say it, but they will know exactly where your heart still aches, and where you are still prone to emotional conflict. Guarding your past attachments denies them that access. It keeps your heart protected from those who might misuse your openness. The past has its place, but it should not be handed over as a tool for someone else to measure their own worth in your life. When you keep past attachments to yourself, you avoid creating unnecessary competition between what was and what is. You prevent the people in your life from constantly wondering whether they are standing in the shadow of someone else. Some stories are meant to remain unspoken, not out of shame, but out of wisdom. The past does not need to be relived through your words to those who walk with you now. Sometimes, revisiting old attachments through conversation keeps them alive in ways that delay your growth. Speaking about them repeatedly can reignite feelings you were once working to release. When you keep those memories contained, you allow them to settle, to lose their grip, to fade without being continually pulled to the surface. Protecting your past is about giving yourself the freedom to move forward, without constantly carrying the weight of what came before. It is about learning to be present in the now without dragging yesterday's ghosts into today's room. Keeping your past attachments private is a form of emotional discipline. It is a conscious choice to separate what you feel from what you choose to reveal. It allows you to move with strength, to protect the integrity of your current life, and to maintain control over your emotional narrative. You owe it to yourself to be the guardian of your own story, to decide which chapters remain closed and which ones you choose to share. Some attachments, no matter how significant they once were, deserve the dignity of silence. Maintaining emotional boundaries is not about building walls to keep people out, it is about constructing the necessary framework to protect your peace, your identity, and your sense of self. Too often, people blur these boundaries under the illusion that closeness requires complete emotional exposure. They begin to believe that in order to be loved, they must give all of themselves, that holding back even a fraction is somehow dishonest. But emotional boundaries are the very thing that safeguard your power. They are what prevent others from stepping into places within you where they do not belong, from trespassing into parts of you that are not for public access. There is strength in knowing that not every feeling must be shared, not every thought must be voiced, and not every emotional response must be explained. When you maintain emotional boundaries, you decide which parts of you are shared, and which parts remain yours. You create a healthy distance that allows you to connect with others without losing yourself in the process. Without boundaries, you run the risk of emotional entanglement where your happiness, your worth, and your peace become dependent on how someone else responds to you or treats you. Emotional boundaries protect you from that dependency and keep you grounded in your own identity. The lack of emotional boundaries often leads to overexposure, where you give too much too soon, or where you let others in so deeply that they begin to shape your thoughts and feelings without your awareness. People who do not respect boundaries may start to believe they have a right to influence your choices, to dictate your reactions, or to control how you process your emotions. When you maintain your emotional boundaries, you make it clear that while people may walk beside you, they do not get to walk through you. They do not get to rearrange your emotional landscape. Maintaining emotional boundaries also requires that you become comfortable with the discomfort of saying no, with the strength to withdraw when your space is being encroached upon. There will be moments when people push against your boundaries to test how much you will tolerate, to see if you will compromise your standards for the sake of acceptance. The ability to stand firm in those moments is a reflection of your self-respect. It shows that you are not willing to sacrifice your emotional health just to maintain the illusion of harmony. There is a false belief that love should have no barriers, that real connection requires total emotional transparency. But in truth, the deepest, healthiest relationships are built on mutual respect for each other's emotional boundaries. They thrive when both people understand that some parts of the heart must remain protected, that privacy is not a sign of distance, but a sign of self-awareness. Emotional boundaries create a sense of balance where both connection and individuality can exist without one consuming the other. People who fail to maintain emotional boundaries often find themselves drained, constantly pouring into others while their own emotional reserves are left depleted. They become addicted to over-explaining, over-sharing, and over-accommodating, in the hope that by giving everything, they will be valued more. But this pattern leads to emotional exhaustion and resentment, because it is not sustainable. Protecting your boundaries is not selfish. It is necessary to ensure that you can continue to show up fully, with energy and clarity, without feeling as though you are being consumed. It is easy to assume that being emotionally open will always bring you closer to others, but without boundaries, openness can quickly become vulnerability that is mishandled. There will always be people who are not equipped to carry the weight of your emotions, who may misunderstand your openness or use it against you when circumstances change. Maintaining emotional boundaries ensures that you never hand over pieces of yourself to those who have not earned the right to hold them. It gives you the space to choose who gets access and at what level. Emotional boundaries are an act of self-leadership. They reflect the understanding that while you can be compassionate, connected, and present, you must also be discerning. You set the pace. You decide the distance. You control the level of access others have to your inner world. This is how you preserve your emotional freedom, and how you prevent yourself from being shaped, directed, or consumed by the feelings and expectations of others. Emotional boundaries protect your power, they preserve your peace, and they ensure that you never abandon yourself in the process of loving someone else.